The sun has not yet risen over the Golden Horn. The great city of Constantinople is largely silent, save for the lapping of water against the sea walls and the distant, rhythmic call of the early morning. But inside the stone walls of the barracks, the day has already begun. Tonight, we are going to step away from the noise of battle. Instead, we will walk through the quiet, disciplined life of the Janissary cause. We will look past the wars and the politics to find the steady rhythm of their daily existence, from the lighting of the morning lamps to the sharing of their evening meal. We will explore the structure, the order, and the silent routine of the Ottoman Empire's most dedicated soldiers. Before we settle into the barracks, I'm curious, where are you checking in from tonight? Whether you are winding down after a long day, or perhaps it is already the quiet hours of the morning where you are exactly where you need to be. If these slow explorations of history help you relax, you are welcome here. Now, if you haven't already, this is the perfect time to dim the lights, perhaps switch on a fan for some gentle background noise, and let your shoulders drop. Let's drift back to the year 1540. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. You are 8 years old, standing in the courtyard of a small village in the Balkans. The harvest has recently finished, and the village is settling into the slower rhythm of the approaching winter. The leaves on the deciduous trees have turned to shades of russet and gold, and they carpet the ground, softening the footsteps of the villagers as they go about their evening chores. Your world is small, enclosed by the high peaks of the mountains that frame the horizon. It is a world defined by the blacksmith's forge where your father works, the rhythmic clanging of the hammer against heated iron serving as the clock for your days. It is defined by the small plot of land your mother tends, pulling the last of the root vegetables from the cooling soil. Into this quiet, rural life comes a new sound. It is not the chaotic noise of an invasion, nor the frightened shouting of alarm. It is the organized, steady approach of the state. Horses' hooves clip-clop rhythmically on the cobblestones of the village square. There is the jingle of bridles, the creak of leather saddles, and the low, polite murmur of voices. The officials have arrived. They wear the flowing robes and distinctive, tall turbans of the capital, fabrics that seem too fine for this rough country. They are not soldiers come to pillage. They are bureaucrats come to conduct the Devshirm. This is the Gatherenger system of recruitment that operates with the cold, mathematical precision of a census. The process is orderly. The village gathers in the square. There is a weight in the air, a collective holding of breath, but the procedure follows strict protocols. The officials are looking for specific qualities. They are not looking for enemies. They are looking for potential. They examine the boys of the village with the practiced eye of men who understand the requirements of the state. They check for clear eyes, for strong limbs, for a sharpness of mind that suggests a capacity for learning complicated tasks. You stand before them. The official checks your teeth, feels the muscle tone in your arms, and notes your height. He nods, a small, almost imperceptible motion. A name is written in a ledger with a reed pen. A mark is made on a page. The transaction is recorded in the Imperial archives before you have even taken a step. The departure is not a chaotic scramble, but a somber procession. The farewells are spoken in low voices. Your mother presses a small wooden cross into your palm, her hands warm against yours, the wood smooth from years of handling. Your father stands by the gate, his expression unreadable, watching as the only life you have ever known begins to fade into the distance. The mist of the mountains begins to obscure the village, softening the edges of the houses until they disappear entirely. The journey to Constantinople is measured not in hours, but in the slow transition of the landscape. You are part of a column of boys, walking 2 by 2. The road stretches out ahead, a ribbon of packed earth that winds its way through the valleys and over the mountain passes. Day after day, the rhythm is the same. The sound of boots on dirt crunch, crunch, crunch. The rustle of the wind in the pines. The creak of the wooden wheels of the supply wagons that follow the column. A rhythmic groan of timber that marks the passing of the hours. The Ottoman guards who accompany you are not cruel. They are indifferent. They are doing a job. They ensure you are fed, that you have water from the skins, and that the column keeps moving. You are raw material being transported to the center of the world to be refined. At night, the column stops at caravanserais. These are massive stone way stations built by the empire to ensure the flow of trade and people. They are spaced exactly 1 day's journey, apart, a testament to the incredible organization of the Ottoman state. Inside the high stone walls of the caravanserai, the world feels safe and enclosed. The wind is blocked by the thick masonry. In the central courtyard, fires are lit. You can smell the smoke of the wood, the roasting lamb, and the baking bread. The warmth of the fire spreads through the air, chasing away the chill of the evening. You eat your ration, a simple, warm soup and a piece of bread. The heat of the food spreads through your chest, relaxing your muscles after the long day of walking. Lying on a straw mat, listening to the low murmur of conversations in a dozen different languages, you watch the sparks from the fire drift up toward the stars. You begin to realize the scale of the thing you have become a part of. This is an empire that spans continents, a machine of administration that never sleeps. Weeks pass. The air grows warmer, more humid. The vegetation changes from the pines of the mountains to the cypress and olive trees of the coast. And then, finally, you see it. Constantinople. For a boy from a small village, the city is beyond comprehension. It rises from the sea like a mountain range made of stone and marble. The massive dome of the Hagia Sophia dominates the skyline, floating above the city in the morning mist. The Golden Horn is thick with ship's galleys, merchant vessels, small fishing boats all bobbing gently on the grey-blue water. You pass through the great land walls, entering a labyrinth of streets that teem with life. But you do not stop to explore. You are taken directly to the processing centers. The system that brought you here has been refined over generations, and it has a place for everyone. First, there is the medical examination. It is quiet, thorough, and clinical. Doctors in clean robes check your heart, your lungs, your vision. They look at your hands and your feet. The empire invests heavily in its Janissaries, and they do not waste resources. Those who are frail are filtered out. The room smells of medicinal herbs and clean linen. Then comes the evaluation of the mind. The recruiters speak to you, asking questions, testing your memory, observing your temperament. They are looking for a specific balance. Boys who are intelligent enough to master complex tactics and theology, but malleable enough to be reshaped. They want discipline, not recklessness. They want a quiet competence. You pass. The doors to your past are firmly closed. You are separated from the other boys from your region to ensure that no old loyalties remain. You are now a blank slate. The conversion is a ritual of shedding one identity and assuming another. It happens in a quiet room, scented with rosewater and incense. You are washed, scrubbed, clean of the dust of the road and the dirt of the village. The water is warm, poured from copper basins. You are given new clothes, simple clean linen that feels light against your skin. You recite the words, La ilaha illa Allah, there is no God but God. The sounds are foreign on your tongue, soft and round compared to the sharp consonants of your native language. With these words, the village boy ceases to exist. You are given a new name, a Turkish name. It is written in the ledger, replacing the one your parents gave you, but the true conversion is slow. It happens over months and years. It happens in the classroom and on the training field. The training begins. It is a life of absolute regularity. Every morning, before the sun has risen, the day starts with the sound of the drum. Boom, boom. It is not a loud sound, but a steady one. You rise from your sleeping mat in the dark barracks. The air is cool and still. The stone floor is cold beneath your bare feet. You move to the fountains for ablutions, the ritual washing before prayer. The water is cold on your face, your hands, your feet. It wakes you up, sharpening your senses. You stand in rows with your new brothers, shoulder to shoulder, and bow in unison. The silence of the morning is broken only by the murmur of prayer and the rustle of fabric. There is a comfort in this shared movement, a sense of belonging to a single organism. Breakfast is the same every day. A bowl of warm soup, a piece of bread, weak tea. It is simple, functional fuel. You eat quickly, quietly. There is no time for leisure, and gluttony is frowned upon. Then the drills. For hours, under the watchful eye of veteran Janissaries, you practice. You learn to stand perfectly still. You learn to march in step, hundreds of feet hitting the ground at the exact same moment. Left, right, left, right. The sound becomes a hypnotic rhythm, a heartbeat that you all share. You learn to breathe in time with the man next to you. You learn the weapons, the bow, the sword, and later, the musket. You practice the motions until they are not thoughts, but reflexes. You learn to load the musket, pour the powder, drop the ball, ram it down, prime the pan. Over and over again, the click of the metal, the slide of the ramrod, the smell of the black powder. Your hands learn the weight of the steel, the texture of the wood. Your instructors are strict, but they are also mentors. They tell you that you are special. They tell you that you are the sons of the Sultan. They tell you that your old family is gone, and that the cause is your family now. They speak of the Janissary brotherhood with a reverence usually reserved for religion. Midday brings a shift in the rhythm. The physical exertion stops, and the mental training begins. You sit in quiet halls, learning to read and write. You study the beautiful, flowing script of the Ottoman Turkish language. The reed pen scratches softly against the paper. You memorize verses. You study arithmetic, geography, and the laws of the empire. It is a comprehensive education, far beyond anything you could have imagined in your village. You are being crafted into a gentleman as well as a soldier. You are learning the etiquette of the court, the proper way to hold a cup, the correct way to address a superior. You learn that a Janissary is not a brute. A Janissary is a symbol of the Sultan's order. The evening meal is the center of your social world. In the Janissary cause, the kitchen is sacred. The unit is organized around the kazan, the massive copper cauldron used to cook the daily meal. You gather around it with your messmates. The smell of stew hangs heavy in the air lamb, chickpeas, onions. The spoon is a symbol of your rank and your brotherhood. To eat from the same cauldron is to share a bond that is stronger than blood. The hierarchy here is rigid, but it provides a sense of safety. Everyone knows their place. The senior soldiers sit in the places of honor closest to the warmth. The recruits serve. There is no confusion, no ambiguity. It is a world of perfect order. You know exactly what is expected of you, and you know exactly what you will receive in return. Lights out comes early. The barracks are dark. You lie on your mat, surrounded by the breathing of 100 other boys. The windows are high and narrow, letting in only a sliver of moonlight. In the quiet of the night, sometimes the old memories drift back. The smell of the forge, the sound of your mother's voice singing a folk song. But they feel distant now, like a dream you had a long time ago. You push them away. You focus on the rhythm of the breathing around you. You focus on the schedule for tomorrow. The drum, the water, the prayer, the drill. Years pass in this way. The seasons turn outside the barracks walls. You grow taller, broader. The soft hands of the village boy become the calloused hands of the warrior. The uniform of the Janissary, the tall felt cap known as the balk. The wool coat becomes your second skin. The balk is distinctive, with a piece of cloth hanging down the back, said to represent the sleeve of a holy man who once blessed the cause. When you wear it, you feel the weight of history. You are no longer a captive. You are a ghulam of the Sultan, a servant of the gate. You have been taken apart and put back together, piece by piece, into something stronger, something sharper. This is the reality of the Janissary. It is not a life of constant battle, but a life of constant preparation. It is a life defined by the comfort of routine, the security of the hierarchy, and the deep, silent loyalty to the cause. As you reach adulthood, the training evolves. You are no longer just learning, you are mastering. You are assigned to a specific order or regiment. This regiment becomes your tribe. You live with them, eat with them, and march with them. The barracks themselves are marvels of Ottoman architecture. They are designed for hygiene and order. The floors are scrubbed daily. The latrines are kept clean. There are bathhouses, hammams, where the steam rises in thick clouds, relaxing muscles tired from the day's labor. In the hammam, the hierarchy softens slightly. Through the mist, voices echo stories of past campaigns, rumors from the palace, quiet jokes shared between friends. On Fridays, the routine shifts. It is the holy day. The drill is suspended. You dress in your finest uniform. The white felt of your cap is brushed until it is spotless. The blue or red cloth of your coat is smoothed. You march, not to the training field, but to the mosque. Inside the mosque, the atmosphere is heavy with reverence. Hundreds of Janissaries kneel in unison. The carpet is soft beneath your knees. The voice of the imam reaches into the dome, resonating off the tilework. In these moments, you feel a profound sense of peace. You are part of something divine, something eternal. You are the sword of this faith, the protector of this order. The pay you receive is regular. Every 3 months, there is a ceremony, the distribution of the pay. It is a grand event. The Sultan himself, or his Grand Vizier, observes. Bags of silver coins are distributed to the commanders of each regiment, who then distribute them to the men. The coins are heavy, tangible proof of your value. You are well fed, well clothed, and well paid. In a world where most people struggle to survive the winter, you live in relative comfort. But this comfort comes with a price: absolute obedience. The discipline of the Janissary is legendary because it is total. To disobey an order is to break the chain that holds the empire together. Punishment, when it comes, is swift and corporal, but it is rarely needed for the veterans. The shame of failing your brothers is a far greater deterrent than the whip. The social pressure of the barracks is immense. You watch each other. You correct each other. You become a self-regulating organism. There are moments of leisure, too. In the evenings, after the meal is finished and the cauldron is cleaned, there is time for coffee. This dark, bitter drink is becoming popular in the capital. You sit in small circles, sipping from small cups. The caffeine sharpens the mind for conversation. You talk of poetry. You talk of the stars. You play quiet games of strategy. You are not just a soldier. You are a member of a privileged class. When you walk through the streets of Constantinople on your rare days of leave, the crowds part for you. The shopkeepers bow. The people of the city know the uniform. They know that you are the Sultan's shadow. You walk with a specific, gait-measured, confident, unhurried. You have nothing to fear from the chaos of the street, because you are the order. And so, the years blur together. The recruit becomes the soldier becomes the veteran. The veteran becomes the instructor, watching the new boys arrive with terror in their eyes. Knowing that you will break them down and build them up, just as was done to you, the cycle continues. The drum beats, the water flows, the prayers are said, the cauldron is stirred. This is the daily routine of a Janissary. It is a life of silence and sound, of stillness and motion, of individuality erased and purpose found. It is a life lived in the shadow of the Sultan, a life given over entirely to the service of the state. And tonight, as the moon rises over the barracks and the lamps are extinguished one by one, the Janissaries sleep, their breathing steady and synchronized, waiting for the drum that will signal the start of another day. The architect of empire. Let us move now from the general to the specific. Let us leave the collective rhythm of the barracks and follow the thread of a single life. It is a thread that begins in the quiet, rolling hills of Bosnia and weaves its way to the very center of the world. The story begins in a landscape of deep green valleys and mist-covered mountains. In a small village whose name has largely faded into the mist of history, a boy named Mehmed Sokollu was born around the year 1505. Picture the setting. It is a place defined by the seasons. In the winter, the snow lies heavy on the pine branches, creating a silence so profound you can hear your own heartbeat. In the spring, the meltwater rushes down through the limestone gorges, feeding the Drina River until it runs cold and fast. Bajika's father was likely a man of standing in this small community, perhaps a priest or a minor nobleman, and his mother was a woman whose face would slowly fade from his memory, replaced by the abstract idea of home. Like the other boys we have imagined, young Bajika lived a life attuned to the soil and the sky. He knew the specific time of year when the sheep needed to be moved to higher pastures. He knew the sound of the church bell ringing across the valley floor. He knew the prayers of the Orthodox Church, recited in the ancient rhythms of Church Slavonic. But as we have seen, the Ottoman Empire was a machine that required fuel, and so the officials came. The boy was swept up in the Devsham, the gathering. He was taken from the green hills of Bosnia, marched along the imperial roads, and brought to the great city of Constantinople. The transformation of Bajika Sokollu into Mehmed Sokollu was not a sudden event. It was a slow, deliberate process of erosion and reconstruction, like water shaping stone. It began, as it did for all recruits, with the quiet erasure of his previous self. The name Bajika was whispered for the last time, and the name Memde was written in the ledger. The child who had once stood in a wooden church, smelling beeswax, candles and incense, now learned to stand in the great stone mosques of the capital. He learned the precise physical movements of Islamic prayer, the bowing, the kneeling, the prostration toward Mecca. He learned to mark time not by the Julian calendar of his village, with its feast days of Christmas and Easter, but by the lunar cycle of the Islamic year. He learned the rhythm of Ramadan, the days of fasting when the city fell silent during the daylight hours, only to come alive with the setting of the sun. Most crucially, the young man who had been raised to see the Ottoman Empire as a foreign power, an occupying force in his homeland, began to see it differently. Through years of slow, methodical education, he learned to view the empire as the rightful inheritor of Roman authority. He learned to see the Sultan not just as a ruler, but as the shadow of God on earth. But Mehmed was not just another recruit. In the quiet halls of the palace school, where the dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight, he began to distinguish himself. The palace school was a world of intense, quiet study. It was a place of parchment and ink, of soft voices and turning pages. Mehmed possessed a mind that seemed perfectly designed for this environment. His intelligence was remarkable. He had a memory that was nearly perfect, a vast internal library where he could store the complex details of Islamic theology, the intricacies of Ottoman law, and the thousands of administrative procedures that kept the empire running. He mastered the languages of the empire. He learned the flowery, poetic Persian used for literature. He learned the precise, legalistic Arabic used for religion and law. And he mastered the Ottoman Turkish used for administration, a language of hierarchy and order. But it was not just his book learning that set him apart. In the dormitory at night, or during the breaks in the courtyard, Mehmed demonstrated an intuitive understanding of the people around him. He could read the motivations of others. He understood the fears and the ambitions of his fellow students. While others competed openly, creating noise and friction, Mehmed moved like water. He formed alliances with care and precision. He made others feel that his success was also their success. He never committed himself so completely to one path that he could not adjust his course if the wind changed. His rise was steady. It was not a sudden leap, but a gradual ascent. His first significant appointment came during the reign of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. He was assigned to serve as a clerk in the Imperial Chancery. To a modern observer, this might seem like a mundane position, a life of paperwork and filing. But in the Ottoman Empire, the pen was as powerful as the sword. Imagine the Chancery. It is a large, high-ceilinged room in the Topkapi Palace. The walls are lined with shelves, stacked high with scrolls and ledgers. The air smells of paper, wax, and dried ink. It is a quiet place, filled with the scratching of reed pens and the rustle of documents. Here, Mehmed sat at a low desk, day after day, year after year. Every significant decision made by the Sultan passed through this room. Every order to a general, every tax assessment for a province, every letter to a foreign king. Mehmed absorbed it all. He became a sponge for the details of imperial administration. He learned how the grain shipments from Egypt were tracked and recorded. He learned how the silver mines in Serbia were managed. He learned the logistical complex of supplying an army on the march, how many camels were needed to carry water, how much barley was needed for the horses. He learned the delicate language of diplomacy, how to phrase a letter to the Shah of Persia or the King of France in a way that asserted Ottoman superiority without causing an immediate war. More importantly, he learned to see the patterns. When he read reports from provincial governors describing a poor harvest, he understood what that meant for the tax revenue 2 years down the line. When he saw a subtle change in the tone of a letter from a foreign ambassador, he sensed the shifting of alliances in Europe. He learned to anticipate problems before they became crises. He was the calm center in a world of chaotic information. From the Chancery, he moved out into the world. He was appointed governor of several provinces, stepping out of the quiet rooms of the palace and into the dust and noise of the empire. In Rumelia, the European provinces of the empire, he learned to balance the competing interests of the Turkish settlers who had been given land and the local Christian nobility who still held influence. He learned to listen to the grievances of the peasants and the complaints of the merchants. In Anatolia, the heartland, he grappled with the complex religious tensions that simmered beneath the surface. He learned that governing was not just about giving orders. It was about maintaining a delicate equilibrium. In Egypt, the wealthiest province, he learned the art of finance. He discovered how to extract the maximum revenue for the Imperial Treasury without pushing the population into rebellion. He walked the docks of Alexandria, watching the ships load with grain and spices, understanding that the strength of the empire relied as much on trade as it did on muskets. Each of these positions was a lesson. He observed the strengths of the Ottoman system, its organization, its meritocracy, but he also saw its weaknesses. He saw how the religious tolerance of the empire, while noble, created openings for foreign interference. He saw how the military was changing, how the reliance on heavy cannons and muskets was altering the ancient rhythms of warfare. He recognized that the empire was growing too large, that the distances were becoming too great for the traditional methods of control. And then, in the year 1565, the summit was reached. Suleiman the Magnificent, the Sultan who had ruled for decades, appointed Mehmed Sokollu as Grand Vizier. Mehmed was now the second most powerful man in the world. He stood at the right hand of the Sultan. He held the imperial seal. He inherited an empire that was at the absolute height of its power, yet one that was facing unprecedented challenges. The conquest of Hungary had pushed the borders deep into Europe, but holding those distant forts required vast amounts of gold and men. In the Mediterranean, the endless naval war against Spain and Venice was a drain on the treasury, and looming over everything was the question of succession. Suleiman was old. His sons were maneuvering against each other. The spectre of civil war hung over the palace like a dark cloud. Mehmed's response to these challenges was typical of the man. He did not panic. He did not attempt radical, sweeping changes that would upset the balance. Instead, he focused on efficiency. He focused on the details. He worked to standardize the tax collection procedures, reducing the corruption that siphoned off wealth before it reached the capital. He reorganized the military supply lines, ensuring that the soldiers on the frontier had bread and powder. He established new protocols for diplomats, enhancing the prestige of the empire through ceremony and etiquette. But perhaps the most profound expression of Mehmed's mind was not in his laws, but in his buildings. He was a builder. During his time as Grand Vizier, he commissioned projects that revealed both his personal vision and his political genius. Consider the bridge in Visegrad. It spans the Drina River in his native Bosnia. It is a place he must have remembered from his childhood, the fast green water cutting through the mountains. The construction of the Mehmed Pasha Bridge was a masterpiece of Ottoman engineering. It consists of 11 masonry arches sweeping across the water with a grace that defies the weight of the stone. The architect was Mehmed Sokollu, the greatest builder of the age, and together they created something timeless. Imagine standing on the banks of the Drina as the bridge was being built. The sound of the chisels against the white stone, the shouts of the workmen, the slow, heavy movement of the blocks being lifted into place. The bridge was designed according to classical principles of geometry, perfectly proportioned, harmonious, serene. It was more than just a way to cross a river. It was a statement. By building this magnificent structure in the remote hills of his homeland, Mehmed was sending a message. He was telling the people of Bosnia, his own people, that the empire was not just a taker of taxes and children. He was showing them that the empire brought civilization, trade, and connection. For the local Serbs who walked across those white stones, the bridge was a tangible proof of the benefits of Ottoman rule. It was a gift from the boy who had been taken away, returning now as a benefactor. In Constantinople, his building projects were even more ambitious. The Sokollu Mehmed Pasha Mosque is considered one of the gems of Ottoman architecture. It is not the largest mosque in the city, but it is perhaps the most perfect. Step inside the mosque in your mind. The noise of the city fades away instantly. The interior is cool and dim, lit by the soft light filtering through colored glass. The central dome floats above you, supported by massive columns that are hidden in the walls, making the space feel open and airy. The walls are covered in Iznik tiles, deep blues, emerald greens, and vibrant reds forming intricate floral patterns that draw the eye upward. The courtyard is a sanctuary of peace. There is a central fountain where the water bubbles gently, a sound that calms the mind and prepares the soul for prayer. The arcades are perfectly proportioned, creating a rhythm of arches and columns that feels musical. This mosque was Mehmed's statement to the capital. It was his way of saying that he, a convert, a former Christian boy from the Balkans, was a full participant in this civilization. He was declaring that the Ottoman Empire was the heir to Rome and Byzantium, and that he was one of its great architects. His vision extended even further. He dreamed of projects that seemed impossible to lesser men. He conceived of a canal that would connect the Don and Volga rivers in Russia, a massive engineering feat that would have linked the Black Sea to the Caspian Sea. It would have opened up trade routes to Central Asia and allowed the Ottoman Navy to project power into the heart of the continent. The project ultimately failed. The distances were too great, the logistics too difficult, and the resistance from the Russians too strong. But the fact that he attempted it shows the scale of his thinking. He was a man who looked at a map of the world and saw not just what was there, but what could be there. His diplomatic achievements were just as significant, though they were built with words rather than stone. Mehmed understood that the empire could not fight everyone at once. He used diplomacy to maintain the balance of power in Europe, playing one nation against another to secure Ottoman interests. His correspondence with the rulers of Europe reveals a sophisticated mind. He wrote to the King of France, managing the delicate alliance between the Sultan and the Christian monarch. He understood that France needed the Ottomans to counter the power of the Habsburgs, and he used this need to extract favorable terms. He negotiated with the Venetians, the great merchant republic of the sea. Venice was a rival, but also a partner. The Ottomans needed Venetian trade, and the Venetians needed access to Ottoman markets. Mehmed walked this tightrope with grace. His letters to the Doge of Venice were masterpieces of polite intimidation, firm on matters of state, yet always leaving the door open for commerce. On the eastern frontier, the challenge was Persia. The Safavid Empire was a religious and military rival, a constant threat to the Ottoman flank. Mehmed combined military pressure with diplomatic engagement. He knew when to send the army and when to send an ambassador. He managed to keep the border stable, avoiding the kind of total, ruinous war that could have bankrupted the state. His days were filled with this high-stakes chess game. Yet, amidst the grand strategy, he never lost sight of the internal mechanics of the empire. He understood that the Ottoman state was a tapestry woven from many different threads. It was Turkish and Arab, Balkan and Berber, Muslim, Christian and Jewish. He recognized that the strength of the empire lay in maintaining the balance between these groups. His administrative reforms were designed to preserve this equilibrium. He was a former Janissary, so he understood the soldiers. He worked to keep them loyal, ensuring they were paid on time and treated with respect. But he also worked to check their power, preventing them from becoming the masters of the state. Then came the year 1566. Sultan Suleiman died while on campaign in Hungary. It was a moment of supreme danger. The death of a sultan often led to chaos, to rebellion, to brothers fighting brothers. Mehmed kept the death secret. For weeks, as the army marched, he pretended the sultan was still alive. He issued orders in Suleiman's name. He kept the physicians coming and going from the sultan's tent. He bought time for the heir Selim to secure the throne. When the transition finally happened, it was smooth. There was no civil war. The state continued. This was Mehmed's greatest gift to the empire's stability. Under the new sultan, Selim II, Mehmed's influence reached its zenith. Selim was a different man than his father. He was less interested in the grinding details of government. He preferred the pleasures of the palace, the poetry, the wine, the gardens. For Mehmed, this was an ideal arrangement. The sultan reigned, but the Grand Vizier ruled. Mehmed effectively ran the empire. He managed the day-to-day operations. He made the appointments. He directed the foreign policy. He was the steady hand on the tiller of the ship of state. During these years, he tried to prepare the empire for a changing world. He saw that the European powers were exploring the oceans, finding new routes to India and the Americas. He understood that the old trade routes, the Silk Road, the spice trade through Egypt, were threatened. He encouraged Ottoman merchants to adapt, to build better ships, to seek new markets. He invested in knowledge. His library was legendary. He collected books in Ottoman, Turkish, Arabic, Persian, Greek, and Latin. He employed translators to bring European scientific works into the empire. He believed that knowledge was power, and he wanted the Ottoman state to remain at the cutting edge of science and philosophy. But even a man as powerful as Mehmed Sokollu was mortal. The end, when it came, was sudden and strange. It was the year 1579. Mehmed was an old man now, having served the state for decades. He was holding a public audience, listening to the petitions of the people. It was a routine day. The scribes were writing. The petitioners were waiting. A man approached him. He was dressed as a dervish, a religious mendicant. He seemed harmless, but as he drew near, he drew a knife. The assassination was over in a moment. The guards rushed in, but it was too late. The Grand Vizier, the man who had built bridges and commanded armies, fell. The motive remains a mystery. Was the assassin a madman? Was he a religious fanatic who believed Mehmed was too tolerant, too worldly? Or was he a pawn in a darker political conspiracy, sent by rivals who had grown jealous of the Grand Vizier's immense power? We will never know. His death marked the end of an era. The golden age of administrative competence, of stability and expansion, began to fade. The empire would continue for centuries, but it would never again reach the heights of organization and power that it achieved under Sokollu Mehmed Pasha. But let us not focus on the decline. let us focus on the legacy. The bridge in Visegrad still stands. 500 years later, the white stone arches still span the green water of the Drina. The bridge has survived floods and wars. It has seen empires rise and fall. It remains a silent witness to the vision of the man who built it. The mosque in Constantinople still stands. The faithful still gather there to pray. The blue tiles still shimmer in the soft light. The fountain in the courtyard still bubbles, offering peace to anyone who enters. And beyond the stone and mortar, there is the human legacy. Mehmed's story is a testament to the complexity of the human spirit. He was a man of two worlds. He was Bajika, the Serbian boy from the hills, and he was Mehmed the Ottoman grandee. He lived with this duality his entire life. There are stories or legends, perhaps, say he never forgot his family, that he sent money back to his village, that he protected his relatives, that he maintained a secret connection to the life he had lost. It is said that he appointed his own brother as the patriarch of the Serbian Orthodox Church, a remarkable act that fused his two identities together. Imagine the psychological weight of this existence. To be the most powerful official in an Islamic empire, while carrying the memory of a Christian childhood. To serve the Sultan with absolute loyalty, while quietly nurturing the roots of his origin. He lived in the space between these worlds. He navigated the contradictions with a quiet grace. He found a way to be both things at once. His life illustrates the paradox of the Ottoman system. It was a system built on coercion, taking children, erasing identities. And yet, it was a system that allowed a peasant boy to become a ruler of the world. It was a system of cruelty and opportunity, of strict hierarchy and fluid mobility. Mehmed Sokollu embodied all of this. He was the victim and the beneficiary. He was the servant and the master. The personal life of the man remains hidden behind the veil of history. We do not have his diaries. We do not know his private thoughts as he lay awake at night in the palace, listening to the wind off the Bosphorus. Did he dream of the Bosnian hills? Did he remember the sound of his mother's voice? Or was his mind filled with the cares of the state, the grain shipments, the border forts, the letters from France? We can assume his daily routine was punishing. He rose before the sun for the morning prayer, the cold water on his face, the silence of the dawn. Then the work, the endless stream of paper, the reports from the governors, the petitions from the poor. He sat in the council chamber, the divan, listening to the arguments of the other pashas. He had to be the smartest man in the room, but also the most patient. He had to guide the decision-making without seeming to dictate. His evenings were likely spent in his library or dictating letters to his scribes. He maintained a vast network of clients and protégés, men he had identified and promoted. He created a family of his own choosing, a network of loyalties that spanned the empire. He navigated the treacherous waters of court politics for 15 years as Grand Vizier. He survived the death of one sultan and the accession of another. He survived the jealousy of rivals and the intrigues of the harem. He survived because he was indispensable. He was the memory of the state. He was the one who knew where the bodies were buried and where the gold was stored. In the end, his life is a study in endurance. It is a story about finding order in chaos. It is about the quiet, steady work of building something that lasts. As we leave Mehmed Sokollu now, let us return to the image of the bridge. Picture the white stone arches reflecting in the water. The river flows beneath it, constant and changing, just as time flows beneath the structures we build. The bridge connects one bank to the other, just as Mehmed connected the east and the west, the past and the present, the village and the capital. The sun sets over the Drina Valley. The shadows lengthen. The stone turns from white to grey, and then to blue as the twilight deepens. The air is cool and still. There is only the sound of the water rushing over the riverbed on its long journey to the sea. The empire he served is gone. The sultans are gone. The armies have marched away, but the bridge remains. And in the silence of the Bosnian hills, the memory of the boy named Bajika, who became the man named Mehmed, lingers like the mist in the morning air. Rest now in this image: the quiet river, the sturdy bridge, the slow turning of the earth. The history is written, the work is done, and the night has come. The mystery of the Topkapi Dagger. And now, as we move deeper into the night, let us shift our gaze from the grand architecture of bridges and mosques to something smaller, something intimate, something that can be held in the palm of a hand. Let us walk in our minds through the courtyards of the Topkapi Palace, past the cypress trees and the fountains, into the quiet, guarded rooms of the Treasury. Here, in the dim light, surrounded by golden chalices and ceremonial armor, rests an object that glitters in the shadows. It is a weapon, but it does not look like an instrument of war. It looks like a piece of solidified starlight. This is the Topkapi Dagger. In Ottoman Turkish, it is known as the Topkapi Hankari. To look at it is to see the very soul of the Ottoman ascetica. Love for detail, for geometry, for the way light plays upon stone. But this is not just a beautiful object. Wrapped within its jeweled hilt are secrets that connect the golden age of the sultans to the chaos of the 20th century. It is a silent witness to history, a traveler that has vanished and returned, carrying mysteries that scholars are still whispering about today. Let us go back to the moment of its creation. The year is somewhere in the mid-18th century. The Sultan is Mahmud I. The empire is changing. The days of endless conquest are over, replaced by a need for stability and diplomacy. The empire is fighting for its place in a world that is becoming increasingly connected, increasingly complex. In this time of transition, the creation of beauty was not just a luxury, it was a necessity. It was a way to assert power, to remind the world and perhaps themselves that the House of Osman still possessed the glory of the ancients. The order came from the Sultan's private chambers. The treasury was opened. The finest craftsmen in the empire were summoned. Imagine the workshop where it was made. It would have been a place of intense, quiet concentration. The smell of charcoal from the forge, the tapping of small hammers, the scent of polishing oil. The master goldsmith was likely a man whose family had served the palace for generations. His hands knew the metal in a way that words cannot describe. The jeweler who sat beside him would have spent his life studying the refraction of light through crystal. He knew how to tell a true stone from a clever fake, a skill that was vital in the treacherous markets of the gem trade. First, the blade. It was forged from Damascus steel. This was the legendary metal of the East, its secrets guarded jealously by the armorers of Syria. The steel was not just melted, it was folded. Over and over again, the metal was heated, hammered, folded, and hammered again. This process created a distinctive pattern on the surface of the blade, a rippling, watery effect that looked like a stream flowing over grey stones. The steel was renowned for its paradox. It was hard enough to hold a razor's edge, yet flexible enough to bend without breaking. It was a warrior's steel, but on this dagger, the blade was almost secondary. It was merely the canvas for the art of the hilt. The grip of the dagger was carved from a single piece of nephrite jade. Jade has always held a special place in the courts of the East. It is cool to the touch, smooth as glass, yet hard as stone. In the Ottoman tradition, it was believed to have protective properties. It was said that jade could detect poison, that it could shield its owner from harm. The stone chosen for this dagger was a deep, milky greener color that suggested calm, stability, and the eternal nature of the earth. But the true marveled a thing that catches the eye and holds IT's the jewels. 3 enormous emeralds dominate the hilt. They are the size of walnuts. These are not the pale, clouded stones one might find in a lesser piece. These are stones of extraordinary clarity, with a deep, verdant green that seems to glow from within. They likely came from the mines of Colombia, traveling across the Atlantic, through the markets of Europe, and finally to the workshops of Constantinople. The cut of the stones is traditional. They are not faceted like modern diamonds, cut to sparkle nervously. They are cut in the Mughal style flat, polished surfaces that allow the eye to sink deep into the green depths. They are like pools of water in a forest, calm and still. Surrounding these 3 great emeralds are hundreds of smaller diamonds. Each diamond is set in a tiny gold bezel, crafted with microscopic precision. The goldsmith would have worked with a magnifying lens, placing each stone with the delicacy of a surgeon. The diamonds create a glittering constellation around the emeralds. When you move the dagger, even slightly, the light catches the facets. The effect is dazzling, as if the weapon is breathing light. And then there is the secret. On the pommel, the very top of the handle there, is a large diamond surrounded by a ring of emeralds. To the casual observer, it is just another beautiful detail. But beneath this jewel lies a hidden hinge. If you press the right spot, the top flips open. Inside, there is a small, hollow compartment. What was it for? The legends vary. Some say it was designed to hold poison, a reminder of the dangerous world of court intrigue, where death could come in a cup of sherbet. Others say it was for carrying secret messages, tiny scrolls of paper rolled tight and hidden away. Or perhaps it held a miniature clock, a marvel of European mechanics that was popular in the court at the time. Whatever its purpose, the secret compartment adds a layer of mystery to the object. It transforms it from a piece of jewelry into a tool of statecraft. It suggests that even in the midst of beauty, one must always be prepared for the hidden turn, the unseen danger. For over a century, the dagger remained in the palace. It was worn by sultans during great ceremonies. Imagine the scene. The sultan sits on the throne in the audience chamber. He is dressed in robes of silk brocade, stiff with gold thread. On his head is a turban adorned with hair and feathers, and at his waist, tucked into a sash of Kashmiri wool, is the Topkapi dagger. Foreign ambassadors would enter the room, bowing low. They would see the flash of the emeralds. They would see the glitter of the diamonds. The dagger was part of the theatre of power. It communicated without words. It said, "We possess the wealth of the earth. We possess the skill of the masters. We are the center of the world." But empires, like tides, eventually recede. By the early 20th century, the world was changing rapidly. The Ottoman Empire was old. It was known as the sick man of Europe. Its territories were shrinking. Its treasury was empty. The storm clouds of the Great War were gathering on the horizon. In 1914, the war began. The empire threw its lot in with Germany and Austria-Hungary. It was a desperate gamble, a bid to regain lost glory. The capital, Constantinople, became a city of spies and soldiers, of shortages and fear. And somewhere in the chaos of those years, the dagger vanished. The story of its disappearance is one of the great unsolved mysteries of the Treasury. There are no clear records, only whispers and theories. Some say it was an inside job. They claim that palace officials, desperate for funds to support the war effort, quietly removed the dagger from its case. In this version, they were not thieves, but patriots, selling the family silver to buy rifles and bread for the soldiers, freezing on the Russian front. Others point the finger at German agents. Berlin had a strong presence in the city during the war. German officers walked the halls of the ministries. Did one of them, with an eye for art and a lack of scruples, slip the dagger into a coat pocket during a chaotic evacuation? There is even a theory that Allied spies, British or Russian, infiltrated the palace. Constantinople was a nest of espionage. A British agent, disguised as a merchant or a diplomat, might have spirited the weapon away as a prize, a symbol of the empire they were fighting to destroy. For years, the dagger was gone. It was a ghost. The place where it had rested in the treasury was empty. The empire collapsed. The Sultanate was abolished. The modern Republic of Turkey rose from the ashes. And then, in 1922, just as the dust was settling, the dagger reappeared. It surfaced not in a back alley, but in the polite, well-appointed world of the European art market. A Swiss dealer named Hans Wildenstein announced that he had acquired the piece. His story was vague, the classic, anonymous private collector who wished to remain unnamed. In the art world, such phrases often cover a multitude of sins. But was it the real dagger? The experts were called in. They examined the jade. They looked at the emeralds. They studied the microscopic work of the gold settings. It was a complicated process. The court records from the Ottoman era were incomplete, scattered by the war. There were no photographs of the dagger from the 18th century, only written descriptions which could be interpreted in many ways. The gemologists looked at the stones. The emeralds were real, ancient, flawed, beautiful, natural stones. But could they prove they were the same stones? The diamonds were old cuts, consistent with the 1700s, but diamonds can be moved, reset, replaced. Diplomatic cables flew back and forth between Ankara and Switzerland. The new Turkish government was fighting to establish its identity. They were not just the remnants of a defeated empire. They were a new nation, proud of their heritage. They demanded the return of the dagger. They argued it was stolen property, looted during the confusion of the war. The Swiss authorities were cautious. They cited laws of ownership and good faith purchase. But the pressure mounted. The Treaty of Lausanne was being negotiated, setting the borders of the new Turkey. In the grand game of diplomacy, a single dagger, no matter how beautiful, was a small chip to trade for goodwill. And so, in 1924, the dagger came home. Its return was quiet. There were no parades. It was placed back in the treasury, which was now becoming a museum. It became an object of the people, not just the Sultan. Today, if you visit the Topkapi Palace Museum, you will find it there. The room is dark, climate-controlled to protect the delicate fabrics and organic materials of the collection. The display cases are lit from within, glowing like islands in the night. There it sits. The jade is still cool and green. The emeralds still hold their deep, forest light. The diamonds still catch the eye of every tourist who walks past. But the label next to it is brief. It speaks of Sultan Mahmud. The first, it speaks of gold and emeralds. It says very little about the missing years. It says nothing of the German spies, the desperate officials, the Swiss dealers, or the secret compartments? Modern science has tried to answer the lingering questions. X-ray analysis has confirmed the nature of the stones. They are natural emeralds, full of the tiny inclusions, the jardin, or garden, that mark a true stone. Carbon dating has tested the organic glues used in the construction, confirming an 18th century date. But science cannot tell us who took it. It cannot tell us whose hands held it during those lost years between 1917 and 1922. It cannot tell us if the secret compartment ever carried a message that changed the fate of the war. The dagger remains a mystery wrapped in beauty. In popular culture, the dagger has taken on a life of its own. In the 1960s, it was the star of a famous heist film, Topkapi. In the movie, thieves plot to steal the dagger by lowering a man from the ceiling on a rope. It is a fantasy, a caper, but it cemented the image of the dagger in the world's imagination. It became the ultimate prize, the symbol of the impossible theft. Yet, the reality is more interesting than the fiction. The reality is the craftsmanship. Think of the hands that made it. The patience required to set hundreds of tiny diamonds, one by one. The steadiness of the hand that carved the jade. These artisans were not thinking of wars or movies. They were thinking of perfection. They were trying to create something that would outlast them. And they succeeded. The Ottoman Empire is gone. The sultans who wore this dagger are dust. The soldiers who fought in the Great War have all passed away. The political maps have been redrawn a dozen times. But the dagger remains. It is a survivor. It has survived the fall of a dynasty. It has survived theft and travel. It has survived the transition from a sacred object of the court to a curiosity in a glass case. As you look at it in your mind's eye, focus on the stillness of the emeralds. They have seen the candlelit audiences of the 18th century. They have seen the desperate meetings of the war years. They have seen the fluorescent lights of the modern museum. Through it all, they have remained unchanged. They are indifferent to human history. They simply exist, reflecting the light that falls upon them. There is a comfort in that. In a world of constant change, of noise and hurry, objects like the Topkapi Dagger remind us of the endurance of things. They remind us that beauty can survive chaos. The secret compartment is empty now. There is no poison, no message. Just a small, hollow space in the heart of the diamond. A space for us to place our own imaginations. So, let us leave the dagger there, safe in its case in Istanbul. The night watchman walks his rounds in the palace. The Bosphorus flows silently outside the walls. The city sleeps, and the emeralds wait in the dark, green and deep and silent, waiting for the morning light to wake them once again. The history is written, the mystery remains, and the night goes on. Life in the Ottoman Harem, power behind the veil. And now, let us turn away from the public courts of the palace. Let us leave behind the council hall where the viziers debated and the drilling grounds where the Janissaries marched. Let us walk toward a different part of the Topkapi Palace, a place hidden behind high walls and guarded gates. We are approaching the Imperial Harem. In the Western imagination, this word harem has spawned countless fantasies. Painters in Paris and London, men who had never set foot in Constantinople, painted pictures of languid women lounging on silk cushions, doing nothing but waiting. They imagined a world of pure indulgence, a chaotic garden of earthly delights. But tonight, we are going to look past the myth. We are going to walk through the heavy wooden doors and find the reality. And the reality is far more interesting and far more orderly than the fantasy. The word itself, haram, comes from the Arabic haram. It means forbidden, yes, but it also means sacred. It implies a sanctuary, a protected space, a world set apart from the mundane commerce of the street. To enter the harem is to enter a city within a city. It is a labyrinth of courtyards, corridors, terraces, and chambers. It is a place of secrets, but also a place of profound structure. It is the private heart of the empire, the domestic center where the dynasty lived, breathed, and continued. Imagine walking through the carriage gate. The noise of the outside world, the shouts of the merchants, the clatter of horses instantly disappears. You step into a world of stone and tile. The air here feels different. It is cooler, stiller. It carries the scent of hyacinths and old wood. The harem was not just a home for the sultan's wives. It was a massive institution. At its peak, in the 16th and 17th centuries, between 800 and 1,000 women lived within these walls. It was a bustling, self-contained community. Who were they? There were the rulers, the consorts, the mothers, but there were also the administrators, the treasurers, the scribes, the nurses, the teachers, the laundresses, the bath attendants. It was a hive of activity run almost entirely by women, for women. Let us walk down the Golden Road. This is the main artery of the harem, a narrow, cobblestone passage that connects the various quarters. The walls are high, built of stone to keep the interior cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Look at the walls. They are not bare stone. They are covered in tiles from Iznik. If you have never seen Iznik tiles, imagine a white ceramic glaze that is as smooth as glass. Painted upon it are intricate floral design stolaps, carnations, roses, cypress trees. The colors are vivid even in the dim light of the corridor. Deep cobalt blue, turquoise like the shallow sea, emerald green, and a distinctive raised coral red. As you walk, these tiles surround you. They create a garden that never fades. In the winter, when the real gardens outside are grey and bare, the walls of the harem remain in eternal bloom. The geometry of the patterns is soothing to the eye. It repeats, over and over, a visual mantra that suggests infinite order. We arrive first at the apartments of the Queen Mother, the Valis Sultan. In the hierarchy of this hidden world, she was the sun around which all other planets orbited. She was the mother of the ruling sultan, and her authority was absolute. Her apartments are the largest and most luxurious in the harem. Let us step inside. The room is dim, lit by shafts of light filtering through stained glass windows. The windows are set high in the walls, ensuring privacy while allowing the sun to paint patterns of red and blue on the carpeted floor. The walls are paneled with mother-of-pearl. Thousands of tiny pieces of iridescent shell have been cut and set into dark walnut wood, creating geometric stars and hexagons. When the light hits them, they shimmer like the surface of a pearl. It is a craftsmanship that required years of patience, a testament to the slow, steady work of the empire's best artisans. The daily routine of the Valis Sultan was as choreographed as any military drill. She did not sleep late. She rose with the call to prayer, the azan drifting in from the minarets of the Hagia Sophia. Her morning began with ritual, the washing of hands and face, the prayers said on a silk prayer rug facing Mecca. The stillness of the morning was sacred. Then the business of the day began. She controlled the harem's budget. She supervised the education of the royal children. She held audiences with the chief black eunuch, her link to the outside world. She was not merely a figurehead. She was a politician, a manager, a matriarch. Her word was law. Below her were the Kadin Effendis, the Sultan's official wives, and the Iqbal, the favored consorts. Let us imagine the life of one of these high-ranking women. Her day, too, is defined by rhythm. It begins in her private apartment. These rooms are comfortable, filled with divanslow sofas lining the walls, covered in velvet and heavy brocade. There are cushions everywhere, stuffed with wool or cotton, embroidered with gold thread. The morning ritual of the bath, the hammam, is central to haram life. The harem had its own bathhouses, marvels of marble and engineering. Imagine entering the hammam. The air is thick and warm, humid with steam. The walls are grey and white marble, veined like a map of a distant country. The ceiling is a high dome pierced with small, star-shaped glass openings. Beams of sunlight cut through the steam, visible pillars of light in the misty air. The sound here is dominated by water splashing into marble basins, known as kurnas. Water echoing against the hard stone surfaces. The steady drip, drip, drip of condensation falling from the dome. The bath was not just for hygiene. It was for purification and relaxation. The women would sit on the warm marble slabs, the gagektasi. They would be scrubbed with rough mitts to remove the dead skin, then washed with soaps made from olive oil and infused with scents. Smell the air. It smells of that clean, green olive soap. It smells of rosewater. It smells of steam and wet stone. After the bath, wrapped in thin cotton towels called pestostals, they would move to the cooling room to rest. Here, they might sip ciabatta, sweet drink made from fruit juices, flowers, and sugar, chilled with snow brought down from the mountains. Grooming was an art form. Hair was not just brushed. It was constructed. It was braided with ribbons, woven with gold thread, adorned with jeweled pins. Fresh flowers, hyacinths in the spring, roses in the summer were tucked behind ears. Makeup was applied with the precision of a painter. Kohl, a dark powder, was used to line the eyes, making the gaze intense and dramatic. Henna, a plant-based dye, was used to stain the palms of the hands and the tips of the fingernails a deep, rusty orange. The clothes they wore were masterpieces of the textile arts. First, the salwalus, billowing trousers made of fine linen or silk, tied at the waist and ankles. Then, a chemise, a sheer undergarment. Over this, the kaftanar long robe, open at the front, with long slits in the sleeves. The fabrics were heavy and rich. Velvets from Bursa, brocades from Venice, silks from China. They were patterned with tulips, clouds, and tiger stripes. A sash, wrapped tightly around the waist, held a jeweled dagger or a pouch for a handkerchief. Breakfast was served in the private chambers. It was not a heavy meal. A tray would be brought in, a large round platter made of copper or silver, placed on a low folding stand. On the tray, fresh bread, warm from the ovens, bowls of honey, golden and thick, white cheese, salty and crumbly, black olives, glistening with oil, and fruit figs, grapes, melons, depending on the season. And then the coffee. By the 16th century, coffee had arrived in Istanbul from Yemen. It had become a ritual. The beans were roasted until dark, ground to a fine powder, and boiled in a small copper pot, the sezve. It was served in tiny porcelain cups, without handles, often placed in jeweled cup holders to protect the fingers from the heat. The coffee was thick, dark, and strong. It was sipped slowly, the ground settling at the bottom of the cup, leaving a pattern that some said could predict the future. After the meal, the day's work began. Contrary to the myths of idleness, the harem was a place of education. It was a school. Most of the women who entered the harem arrived as young girls from far away from the Caucasus, from the Balkans, from Ukraine. They arrived speaking different languages, holding different beliefs. The harem was the crucible that transformed them into Ottomans. They learnt the language. They learnt to speak the high, courtly Turkish of the elite, a language peppered with Persian and Arabic loanwords. They learned to read. The harem had its own library. Women sat in quiet circles, reading the Quran, the great epic poems of Persia, and the histories of the dynasty. They learned music. Music was the heartbeat of the palace. Walking through the courtyards in the afternoon, you would hear the sounds of practice. The plucking of the oud, a pear-shaped lute with a deep, resonant voice. The shimmering sound of the konan, a zither, laid flat on the lap and plucked with tortoiseshell picks. The breathy, mournful sound of the ney, a reed flute that was said to sound like the human soul longing for God. They learned to sing, mastering the complex makams, the musical modes of Ottoman classical music. These were not simple folk songs, but intricate compositions that required discipline and a refined ear, and they learned the arts of the needle. Embroidery was not just a hobby, it was an industry. In the harem workshops, women sat by the windows to catch the light, working on frames. They used silk threads dyed in brilliant reds, blues, and purples. They used silver and gold wire. They created the towels, the sashes, the headscarves, and the ceremonial robes used by the court. The needle moved up and down, a meditative rhythm. The patterns were standardized, yet every woman added her own touch. A slightly tighter stitch here, a flourish there. These textiles were so fine that they were sent as gifts to kings and queens in Europe, symbols of Ottoman sophistication. The social life of the harem was governed by a strict etiquette. It was a hierarchy of respect. When a high-ranking consort entered a room, everyone stood. No one spoke until spoken to. Hands were clasped in front of the body, eyes cast down. But within these rules, there was community. These women lived their entire lives together. They were friends, rivals, sisters, and mentors. They shared the gossip of the palace. They told stories of their childhood homes, mountains, and villages they would never see again. They raised each other's children. The connection to the outside world was maintained by the eunuchs. Specifically, the black eunuchs, the Kara Ugas. They were the guardians of the gate. The chief black eunuch, the Kisla Agassi, was one of the most powerful men in the empire. He alone could enter the harem at any time. He alone could approach the sultan with messages from the women. He was the intermediary. He managed the harems, pious foundations, the charities funded by the wealthy women. He brought news of politics, of war, of the city. In the eyes of the women, he was a bridge to the world beyond the walls. Religion was the framework of their lives. The harem had its own mosque. 5 times a day, the women would gather to pray. For those who had been born Christian or Jewish, the conversion to Islam was part of their integration. But traces of their old lives often remained in private superstitions or customs. Friday prayers were a special occasion. The community gathered together, the women in their finest headscarves, listening to the recitation of the Quran. The sound of the Arabic verses, chanted in a melodic voice, filled the prayer hall, creating a sense of shared spiritual purpose. And what of the children? The harem was a nursery. It was where the future of the dynasty was raised. The princes lived here until they were teenagers. They ran through the courtyards, played by the fountains, and were doted on by hundreds of mothers. But their lives were also strictly controlled. They began their education early, learning to read, to write, to understand the weight of the crown they might one day wear. For a mother, the birth of a son was the turning point of her life. If her son became sultan, she would become valid sultan. She would rule the harem. The stakes were incredibly high. This reality introduced a current of tension beneath the calm surface. Every mother watched the others. Every illness of a prince was a crisis. Every alliance was calculated. Yet, there was also joy. There were festivals. The Bayram celebrations at the end of Ramadan were days of feasting. The harem would be decorated with lights. Musicians would play for hours. Storytellers would spin tales of romance and magic. Shadow puppets, karags, would perform behind illuminated screens, making the women laugh with their bawdy humor. There were the changing seasons. In the spring, the harem gardens came alive. The tulip was the symbol of the Ottoman dynasty, and in April, thousands of tulips bloomed in the courtyards, red, yellow, purple, and white. The women would walk among them, smelling the earth, watching the tortoises that were sometimes let loose in the gardens, with candles fixed to their shells, moving slowly through the flowers at twilight like wandering stars. In the summer, when the heat of Constantinople became oppressive, they moved to the cooler, lower rooms. They ate snow-chilled fruit. They sat by the fountains, letting the sound of the water cool their minds. In the autumn, the plane trees in the palace grounds turned brown and gold. The air grew crisp. Braziers filled with glowing charcoal were brought into the rooms to provide heat. In the winter, snow fell on the domes of the palace. The harem turned inward. The days were short. The nights were long, filled with the light of oil lamps and the warmth of heavy furs. This system, this city of women, lasted for centuries, but like all things, it eventually began to fade. In the 19th century, the world began to press in. The sultans moved out of the Topkapi Palace to new, European-style palaces along the Bosphorus-Dalmabach, Yildiz. These new palaces were open, airy, filled with French furniture and crystal chandeliers. The secluded, medieval world of the Topkapi Harem was left behind. Western ideas began to penetrate the veil. The women began to dress in Parisian fashions, wearing corsets and crinolines instead of kaftans. They learned French. They played the piano instead of the oud. The mystique began to crumble. European women, travellers, like Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, had visited the harems of the past and written about them with a mix of admiration and curiosity. But now, the harem was seen by the modernizing Ottoman elite as a relic, something to be embarrassed by. Finally, with the fall of the empire and the birth of the Turkish Republic in 1923, the institution was abolished. The gates were opened. The women were pensioned off, sent to live in the city or return to their families. The rooms fell silent. The fountains were turned off. The dust settled on the Iznik tiles. Today, you can walk through these rooms as a visitor. You can see the empty divans. You can see the cold marble of the baths. You can see the mother-of pearl gleaming in the dim light. But the life is gone. The sound of the music, the smell of the coffee, the rustle of the silk, the whisper of the secret soul of it, has vanished into history. What remains is the space. A space that was once a universe for thousands of women. A space where they lived, loved, feared, and died. A space that proves that even in the most secluded corners of the world, the human spirit builds a life of order, meaning, and connection. As we reach the end of our journey tonight, let us take a moment to look back at the path we have traveled together. We started in the quiet, mist-covered hills of the Balkans, standing with a young boy who was about to embark on a journey that would change his life forever. We walked with him along the dusty imperial roads, sleeping in the caravanserais, marching toward the great capital. We stood on the training grounds of the Janissaries, feeling the rhythm of the drum, hearing the unison crash of boots on the earth. We saw how discipline and routine transformed scattered individuals into a single, unified force. We followed the rise of Mehmed Sokollu, the boy from Bosnia who became the shadow of the Sultan. We watched him build bridges that spanned not just rivers, but cultures. We saw him sitting in his library, surrounded by books. A man who held the weight of an empire on his shoulders, yet never forgot the village of his birth. We entered the dark, quiet treasury to hold the Topkapi Dagger. We watched the light play on the emeralds, deep and green as a forest pool. We traced its strange journey through theft and diplomacy, a small object that carried the story of an empire's decline and a nation's rebirth. And finally, we walked through the guarded gates of the harem. We sat by the fountains, smelled the rosewater, and listened to the music of the oud drifting through the tiled corridors. We saw the hidden world of women who were the private heart of a public empire. These stories remind us that history is never simple. It is not just a list of dates and battles. It is a tapestry woven from millions of individual lives. The Ottoman Empire was a place of contradictions. It was a place of conquest and tolerance, of cruelty and supreme beauty, of rigid hierarchy and surprising social mobility. It was a place where a shepherd could become a grand vizier, and where a slave could become a queen mother. It was a human creation, with all the flaws and all the magnificence that implies. Tonight, as you lie in the dark, let these images drift through your mind like leaves floating on a slow river. Picture the golden domes of Constantinople gleaming in the last light of the setting sun. Picture the Bosphorus, the deep blue strait that divides Europe and Asia, its waters flowing steadily, endlessly, connecting the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. Picture the night watchman walking the walls of the palace, his lantern swinging gently, a small point of light in the vast darkness. Picture the bridge in Bosnia, the white stone arches standing silent and strong over the rushing water, enduring through the centuries. The history is done. The voices of the past have faded to a whisper. The empire sleeps, and now it is time for you to sleep as well. Let your breathing become like the tide, slow, steady, rhythmic, in and out. Let the tension in your shoulders dissolve. Let the muscles in your face relax. Let the weight of your own day fall away, just as the history of the Janissaries has fallen into the past. You are safe. You are warm. You are exactly where you need to be. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of Ottoman history. I hope these stories have provided you with a sanctuary, a quiet place to rest your mind. If you enjoyed this journey, please consider subscribing to our community. And in the comments, let me know where you would like to travel next. Whether it is the stone streets of ancient Rome, the misty castles of medieval England, or the tea houses of Fez, I am always ready to explore new stories with you. But for now, there is no more history to learn. There are no more dates to remember. There is only the quiet of the night. Sweet dreams, and sleep well.